Imagine you are sitting at a heavy oak desk. In front of you is a map. You're holding a pen, and you have exactly 5 weeks to draw a line across that map.
Which is already a crazy tight deadline for anything, let alone drawing borders.
Right, but here is the catch. The line you draw will instantly divide an area of 450,000 square kilometers. It's going to decide the fate, the nationality, and the literal survival of 88 million people.
Yeah, 88 million people. It's staggering.
And to make it even more impossible, you have never even visited the country you're dividing. You've never been there.
It honestly sounds like the premise of some dystopian alternate history novel.
It really does.
But it's not fiction. It is the exact documented reality of the summer of 1947.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're taking you, our listener, on a journey into a stack of historical documents, legislative acts, and memoirs to unpack a defining, chaotic, and frankly just a staggering moment in 20th century history. We're looking at the arrival of the British Boundary Commissions and the incredibly hasty execution of the 1947 Independence Plan that partitioned the Indian subcontinent.
But before we go any further, I think it's crucial that we establish something right up front.
Yes, definitely.
The sources we're diving into today, they contain highly charged political and communal history. This involves the British Empire, the Indian National Congress, the All India Muslim League, and various other communities whose lives were just irreparably altered by this.
I want to make it absolutely clear to you that our goal today is to impartially report on the historical content provided by these sources.
Right.
We are not taking sides.
Right.
We're not endorsing any political viewpoints. Our mission is strictly to convey the facts, the events, and the ideas contained in the original source material, so you can understand exactly how this unfolded.
Because the mechanics of how this unfolded, it really serves as a terrifying masterclass in, well, the unintended consequences of Rush bureaucracy.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the creation of India and Pakistan as two separate nations, that was not actually the original British plan.
No, not at all. The British initially wanted to keep the subcontinent united as they made their exit.
Which kind of makes sense from their perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the British had spent over a century building this unified administrative, economic, and military apparatus across the subcontinent. Handing over a single united entity was just the cleanest way for them to exit after World War II.
Okay, so they want a clean exit. How do they start?
Well, in the spring of 1946, UK Prime Minister Clement Attlee sent 3 cabinet ministers to India, Lord Pethick Lawrence, Sir Stafford Cripps, and A.V. Alexander. And this group became known as the Cabinet Mission.
The Cabinet Mission. And their job was essentially to figure out a constitutional framework that all the major political players could agree on.
Exactly. And the sources detail their proposed solution, which was this pretty complex 3-tier constitutional scheme.
Right, let's break that down.
So the top tier was a union center, but it was designed to be incredibly weak. It would handle just 3 things: defense, foreign affairs, and communications.
Just those 3.
Just those 3. And beneath that weak center, the provinces would be grouped into 3 distinct sections. Group A would be 6 Hindi-majority provinces. Group B would be Muslim-majority provinces in the northwest, like Punjab and Sindh. And Group C would include Bengal and Assam in the east.
Right. And the sources mention this term, residuary powers, resting with these provinces. Let's clarify that for the listener because it's a huge sticking point.
Oh, massive sticking point.
Residuary powers essentially mean that any governing power that isn't explicitly written down as belonging to the central government automatically defaults to the local provinces. So taxation, education, local law enforcement, all of that would be controlled locally, not centrally.
Yeah, and this decentralized structure was the fatal flaw. The political deadlock was absolute. You had the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and they accepted the plan.
Because they hoped the compulsory grouping in Group B and C would ultimately lead to Pakistan.
Right, exactly. It laid the groundwork for an independent Pakistan.
Yeah.
But the Indian National Congress, led by figures like Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, they vehemently opposed it.
They wanted a strong center.
Yes. They believed a modern unified nation required a strong central government, and they strongly objected to forcing provinces into these specific groups.
It's like, I was thinking about this, it's like trying to build a massive house where the 2 lead architects fundamentally disagree on the blueprint. One architect wants a shared mansion, the other wants a duplex, and the building inspector is just threatening to quit. I mean, it was bound to collapse.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And the collapse wasn't just a breakdown in polite negotiations, it spilled into the streets.
Right, the interim government.
Yeah, the British viceroy formed an interim government with the Congress, but without the Muslim League. And in response, the League launched Direct Action Day on August 16, 1946, to press their demand for Pakistan.
And that triggered massive, tragic communal violence, especially in Calcutta, where thousands of people were killed in a matter of days.
It was horrific. And that violence in Calcutta made it painfully clear that the architects were never going to agree on the blueprint.
The cabinet mission plan was effectively dead.
Dead in the water. The situation on the ground was unraveling rapidly. Which brings us to a dramatic shift in British strategy. Because the architects couldn't agree, the British decided to just split the property and do it immediately.
So let's talk about the timeline, because this is where things get really wild. Originally, the British had set a comfortable, well, an ambitious deadline to transfer power by June 1948.
Right. And Lord Wavell, who was the viceroy at the time, recognized how dire things were getting. So he drew up what he called a breakdown plan, which was basically a strategy for a phased, orderly, province-by-province withdrawal of British troops and officials.
But the UK cabinet looks at Wavell's plan, and they just reject it.
Completely. They thought it looked too much like a chaotic military retreat.
So they fire Wavell, and they replace him with Lord Louis Mountbatten. Mountbatten comes in, and he essentially just throws the 1948 timeline out the window.
Out the window. He formulates the June 3 plan, widely known as the Mountbatten Plan, which moved the independence date up 10 whole months.
10 months early.
Yeah, to August 15, 1947.
And to enforce this breakneck speed, Mountbatten used this weird psychological pressure tactic.
Oh, the calendars.
Yes. He actually had special tear-off calendars printed and placed on the desks of his officials.
Yeah.
Every single day, they'd rip off a page, seeing exactly how few days were left to prepare for the monumental transfer of power.
It's just incredible pressure.
I really have to push back on the logic here, though. The original deadline was June 1948. Moving it to August 1947 is a massive jump. You're taking a process that requires delicate microscopic attention, dividing an entire subcontinent, and you're slashing the timeline from over a year to just about 10 weeks. Why?
Why speed it up?
Yeah. Why speed up a process that is already teetering on the edge of a cliff?
Well, according to the sources, it was exhaustion. Exhaustion and a very real fear of total chaos. You have to remember, the British administration was severely depleted after World War II. They had halted recruitment for the civil service during the war, so the personnel on the ground were stretched incredibly thin. Furthermore, their administrative control over India was slipping daily amidst all this escalating communal violence.
So they were losing their grip.
Exactly. The British government realized that if they start until 1948, they'd likely be caught in the middle of a full-scale civil war, without the military or financial resources to control it. The accelerated timeline was, frankly, a panicked attempt to cut their losses and get out before the entire structure collapsed on top of them.
Wow. Okay, so under this Mountbatten plan, how was the actual splitting decided on a political level?
The plan laid out very specific mechanics. The provincial legislative assemblies of Punjab and Bengal were asked to meet in two separate parts. One part representing Muslim-majority districts, the other representing Hindu-majority districts.
Okay, two separate voting blocks.
Right, and the rule was simple. If either half voted for partition, the entire province would be divided.
And guessing.
The Hindu-majority sections in both provinces voted for partition.
Yeah. And additionally, referendums were set up for the Northwest Frontier Province and the Sylhet district of Assam.
Right, and the sources note that Sylhet, which had a significant Muslim population, ultimately voted to sever its ties with Assam and join East Bengal, which would become part of Pakistan.
So the political concept is established, the voting is done, but, a plan is just a concept until it is codified into law. The UK Parliament had to legally write the British Empire in India out of existence.
And they did this through the Indian Independence Act of 1947.
The speed at which this legislation moved is dizzying. The bill was introduced in the British Parliament on July 4 and received royal assent just 2 weeks later, on July 18.
Just 2 weeks to dismantle an empire on paper.
The act formalized the creation of two independent dominions, India and Pakistan. But let's actually pause on that word for a second. Dominion.
Yeah.
It sounds archaic to modern ears. Why not just say they are creating two independent republics?
Well, because at that specific moment in 1947, they were not republics yet. Dominion status meant they were fully self-governing and independent in their domestic and foreign affairs, sure, but they still technically retained the British monarch as their head of state.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, represented locally by a governor-general. It was really a transitional stepping stone toward becoming fully sovereign republics, which, both nations eventually did.
But this act wasn't just a political declaration. It triggered a massive administrative undertaking.
Yeah.
They had to divide the military, the civil services, the postal networks, the financial reserves, the railways.
Everything. A partition council was set up to handle this division. And, just try to imagine untangling that. You're working at a local administrative office.
Yeah.
Who gets the typewriters? Who gets the railway cars? Who gets the financial debt?
Ah, this is wild.
Yeah. The infrastructure of regions like Punjab and Bengal, the intricate irrigation canals, the road networks, the tax collection systems, it had all been built up over a century to function as a single, unified administrative unit.
Right, and suddenly it's being torn in half by a bureaucratic decree.
Exactly. The Partition Council had to split everything from police uniforms to the assets of the central bank, all while the country was engulfed in chaos.
We also have to address the princely states, because they made up a huge chunk of the subcontinent, over 560 of them.
Yes.
The Independence Act declared that British suzerainty over these states lapsed. Suzerainty is one of those incredibly dusty historical terms.
It is, yeah. It basically functioned like a massive geopolitical protection racket. These 560 states were not directly ruled by the British. Instead, they had treaties where the British handled their defense and foreign policy, and in return, the local rulers pledged loyalty to the crown and managed their own internal affairs.
Overnight, that protection just vanishes.
Poof, gone.
The rulers of these states were given the option to accede to either India or Pakistan. But they were advised by Mountbatten that they had to base their decision on two things: geographical contiguity, meaning who they actually shared a physical border with, and the popular will of their people.
Right. And importantly, independence as separate sovereign nations was explicitly not an option on the table for them.
As a final symbolic end to this era, the title Emperor of India was officially dropped from the British monarch's titles.
Yeah.
But here is where the legal theory hits the really messy reality of geography.
Yeah, because the law demanded a border, but someone actually had to draw the physical line on a map.
Enter Sir Cyril Radcliffe.
Right.
Radcliffe is a highly regarded London barrister. He arrives in India on July 8. He's appointed as the chairman of two boundary commissions, one for the Punjab, one for Bengal. And he's given exactly 5 weeks to finish the job.
And just keep in mind, this is the man tasked with dividing 450,000 square kilometers and the lives of 88 million people.
Okay, wait. I need to make sure I'm reading these sources correctly because this blows my mind. Mountbatten appointed a guy with zero cartography experience, a guy who had never traveled east of Paris and had no knowledge of India, specifically because he was ignorant of it.
You are reading it correctly. From the British perspective, his ignorance was prized as absolute neutrality.
Wow.
Yeah, they believed that because he had no prior attachments, no local friends, and no biases regarding the region, he could make purely objective judicial decisions.
But practically speaking, it was a geopolitical shot in the dark.
Totally. And the setup of these boundary commissions was almost designed to fail from the start. Each commission had 4 judges, 2 nominated by the Indian National Congress, 2 nominated by the Muslim League.
And let me guess, they didn't get along.
Not at all. These judges predictably deadlocked on almost every single major issue. They were deeply partisan, arguing over every inch of territory, which left Radcliffe to ultimately make the unilateral decision.
Unbelievable.
And to make matters worse, Mountbatten deliberately kept his distance from Radcliffe to maintain an illusion of strict British impartiality. Radcliffe was essentially isolated.
The working conditions described in the sources are just brutal. I'm trying to picture the actual mechanism of how this line was drawn. Radcliffe is shut indoors in a sweltering Delhi bungalow because the Indian summer heat is unbearable for him, and he's suffering from a severe bout of dysentery.
Yeah, and because of all that, field surveys are completely impossible. He has to rely entirely on outdated maps and incorrect census returns.
And the census data was bad.
Ooh, notoriously flawed. Different communities had historically inflated their population numbers for political gain. So drawing a thick pencil line on a small-scale, outdated map might cover miles of actual territory, literally splitting a single village or a farm in half.
There's a famous poem by W.H. Auden, simply titled Partition, that perfectly captures the grim absurdity of Radcliffe's task. Auden writes, quote, Unbiased at least he was when he arrived on his mission. Having never set eyes on this land, he was called to partition.
It's a great poem.
Yeah. And the poem goes on to describe him shut up in a lonely mansion, plagued by dysentery and the frightfully hot weather, tasked with settling the fate of millions with out-of-date maps. It's haunting.
It really is. And the 5 weeks did run out. The lines were drawn. But the way the map was carved would leave scars that are still visible today. The final boundary lines, which became known as the Radcliffe Award, were not published until August 17, 1947.
Hold on. Independence is August 14th for Pakistan and August 15th for India.
Yep.
But you're saying the borders were published on the 17th, so people are raising flags, celebrating their new independence, without actually knowing which country they are standing in.
That is the grim reality of those 2 days.
Yeah.
Mountbatten deliberately delayed the publication.
Why?
He wanted to ensure that the independence celebrations weren't ruined by the inevitable outrage that the borders would cause. He also wanted to ensure the British weren't left holding the bag for the violence that would immediately follow the announcement.
That is, wow. It's unbelievable. And when the map was finally revealed, there were some shocking anomalies.
Major anomaly.
For example, the Chittagong Hill tracts in the east. The population was 97% non-Muslim, mostly Buddhist tribes, but it was awarded to East Pakistan. The logic here wasn't demographic at all. It was purely geographical.
Right. The area was deemed inaccessible from the Indian side, so it was just handed over based on terrain.
And on the western side, in the Punjab, the decisions were even more controversial. The districts of Gurdaspur and parts of Firozpur and Zira, which had marginal Muslim majorities, were awarded to India.
And for India, this was a massive strategic boon because Gurdaspur provided a vital continuous land link to the princely state of Kashmir. And it also controlled critical irrigation headworks.
The sources mention a wildly revealing anecdote about this process. Years later, Radcliffe admitted to the veteran journalist Kuldip Nair over a cup of tea, quote, "I nearly gave you Lahore, but then I realized that Pakistan would not have any large city. I had already earmarked Calcutta for India."
That quote is it's devastating.
It really is.
It reveals the tragic detachment of the entire process. Ancient, densely populated cultural and economic hubs like Lahore and Calcutta were being traded like poker chips on a map. He was trying to balance a ledger rather than considering the organic realities, the culture, or the history of the people living there.
Treating cities like poker chips perfectly encapsulates this. And the human cost of prioritizing speed over accuracy was almost unimaginable. The Radcliffe line literally cut right through irrigation systems, disrupting the water supply to millions of acres of farmland.
Yeah, it severed roads, railways, and individual family farms. The infrastructure simply wasn't designed to be divided.
Right.
Severing it caused immediate economic and social collapse in the border regions. And the confusion and panic over the new borders, combined with rising communal tensions, ignited horrific violence.
It resulted in one of the largest mass migrations in human history. Around 12 million people were displaced, fleeing on foot and packed into trains across the newly drawn borders to be with their respective religious majorities.
And the death toll. Over 1 million people lost their lives in the ensuing violence.
The man who drew the line, Radcliffe, what happened to him as this violence erupted?
He was horrified by what his lines had unleashed. Fearing assassination, he burned all his personal papers, maps, and notes regarding the commission. He actually left India on August 15th, before the award was even published.
Before it was even published?
Yeah, and he refused to collect his 40,000 rupee fee for the job. He returned to Britain and never visited India or Pakistan again.
We've really gone from the well-intentioned but doomed cabinet mission to the panicked tear-off calendars of Lord Mountbatten, culminating in a sick, unprepared lawyer drawing a line that shattered millions of lives.
And history's not just in the past. When you hear the news today about modern border disputes, military standoffs, or water conflicts in South Asia, you are looking at the direct, living ghosts of the summer of 1947.
That's a powerful way to put it.
The Radcliffe line retained the very administrative boundaries that defined imperial rule, but it completely fractured the infrastructure that made those regions viable. It is a stark, enduring reminder of what happens when human lives and ancient geographies are subjected to rigid, hasty, bureaucratic deadlines.
It truly is. But I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, lingering question drawn directly from our sources. We know Radcliffe was instructed to base the boundary on contiguous majority areas of Muslims and non-Muslims. But his mandate also included a vague instruction to take into account, quote, other factors.
And those other factors were never explicitly defined in his mandate.
No, they weren't. Furthermore, Diplomatic telegrams from the time reveal that Britain had a vested strategic interest in ensuring that a cooperative successor state controlled the region bordering Afghanistan and Soviet Russia.
The goal being to contain Soviet expansion during the dawn of the Cold War.
Exactly. The British openly supported Pakistan at the UN shortly after. So, here's something for you to ponder. Was the chaotic, seemingly random drawing of the Radcliffe line purely the result of a rushed, botched job by an ignorant lawyer? Or did the British deliberately use those vague other factors to carve out a geopolitical map that served their own Cold War interests, masking calculated strategy as bureaucratic incompetence?
It raises a fundamental question about how we view the end of empires, you know? Are we seeing the chaos of a hasty retreat or the final deliberate moves of a grand geopolitical chess game?
The next time you look at a map, remember that the ink used to draw those lines often hides a much deeper, darker story. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 1947 partition. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you next time.